Hello children, let's start with the lesson Great Scientists. Great scientists are persevering and never deterred by difficulties. Michael Faraday is regarded as one of the most distinguished scientists and inventors of modern times, and his work on electricity is still a subject of study in the form of Faraday's laws. But few know his inspirational life story, which is all about courage and fighting against the odds. Michael Faraday was born into a poverty-stricken family in a dirty London suburb. He suffered from a speech defect as a child. He would pronounce rabbit as wabbit. He could not even say his own name and would call himself Faraday. Other children laughed at him and teachers did not help him either. When he was 12, his mother was forced to take him out of school, thus putting an end to his formal education. Persevering means continuing in a course of action despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Deterred, prevent the occurrence of distinguished, very successful, authoritative, and commanding great respect. Inventors, a person who invented a particular process or device or who invents things as an occupation. Inspirational, providing or showing creative or spiritual inspiration. Courage, the ability to do something that frightens one. Suffered, be affected by or subject to an illness or ailment. Pronounce, make the sound of a word or part of a word in the correct or a particular way. So, from this passage, we come to know that this lesson, Great Scientist, is about a scientist. His name is Michael Faraday. Now, Michael Faraday was a very well-known scientist and an inventor, but his life was not always easy. His family was poor and he had a speech defect. Because of this, he was forced to leave formal school at the age of 12. At 13, however, he started working with a bookbinder, binding hundreds of books during the day and staying up all night to read them. Reading thus became his obsession. One day he came across a book on electricity which had been sent to his master for binding. He started reading it and was completely hooked. That was his first introduction to the subject of electricity, which soon became a lifelong fascination. Faraday was still poor at 21. Once a friend gave him a free ticket to a public lecture and demonstration by the renowned chemist Humphrey Davy at London's Royal Institution. Davy's work on chemicals and electrical lighting was the subject of conversation among the scientists of that age. 70 years later, across the Atlantic Ocean in the USA, the same work enabled Thomas Edison to produce the first consistent light bulb. Obsession, an idea or thought that continually preoccupies or intrudes on a person's mind. Introduction, a person's first experience of a subject or thing. Fascination, interest. Demonstration, an act of showing that something exists or is true by giving proof or evidence. Renowned, famous. Chemist, a person engaged in chemical research or experiments. Consistent, acting or done in the same way over time. So in this passage we see that he starts work as a bookbinder, and when he's binding books he gets attracted to books and he starts reading. His favorite topic is electricity. At the age of 21 he was given a free ticket by a friend. Free ticket to a lecture and demonstration by Humphrey Davy, who was very well known in the society at that time. He was well known for his work on chemicals and electrical lighting. That day in 1812, Faraday was spellbound by Davy's lecture. He kept taking notes about the mysterious force of electric fluid. He was so engrossed in the lecture that he forgot to applaud with the rest of the crowd. When he went back, his notes were so comprehensive that he bound them into a book, meaning to gift it to Davy some day. Faraday decided that day that he didn't just want to sell books. He wanted to be a great scientist, good enough to write his own books. Davy became his role model, but there was a problem. He did not have the social status, money, or the education to pursue science. Faraday thought it would be wonderful if Davy became his mentor, but Davy did not agree initially. Faraday was not dejected, he just kept trying. Spellbound means hold the complete attention of someone as though by magic. Engrossed, absorb all the attention or interest of, applaud, show approval or praise by clapping. Comprehensive, including or dealing with all or nearly all elements or aspects of something. Pursue, follow or chase, initially, at first, dejected, sad and depressed. So in this passage, children, we see that Faraday was very impressed with Davy. And in this lecture, he kept on taking down whatever Davy was saying. And his notes which he made them into a book because he wanted to gift it to Davy. Davy became his inspiration and his role model. He wanted to become like Davy. But he did not have the money, the social status, or the education. Faraday approached Davy because he wanted Davy to become his mentor. But he did not agree. Faraday was not dejected, he was not sad, but he just kept trying. Destiny had a strange plan in store for him. A few years later, a chemical explosion happened inside Davy's lab and he was temporarily blinded. He now needed an assistant with an excellent memory to help him. He was reminded of Faraday and decided to hire him as his secretary. Davy never believed Faraday could do anything in the field of science going by his social status and education. He therefore dismissed Faraday's aspirations and advised him to stick to bookbinding. But Faraday was relentless. He worked day and night and learned as much as he could about Davy's experiments. Soon, Faraday became indispensable to Davy and was promoted to his lab assistant. This was his first step towards a scientific career. Though much of his job now was cleaning labs, at least he got to see some of Davy's leading experiments. Even then, Davy did not have much hope for Faraday. Then Faraday got another chance to prove himself. One day, Davy tried to recreate a famous electromagnetism experiment with fellow chemist William Wollaston, exploring why, when an electric current is applied to a wire, it causes that wire to behave like a magnet. Obviously, the forces were connected, but nobody had figured out how to make it happen continuously. Davy believed that if he could find out why it happened and controlled it, there could be many practical applications of the force. But he was unable to figure it out and was frustrated. He then teased Faraday, asking him to try his hand at it. After he was done cleaning the lab, within a few days, Faraday solved the problem. In fact, he went further and the result was the first induction motor, which converted electrical current into continuous mechanical motion. Meanings: temporarily for a limited period of time. Aspirations: a hope or ambition of achieving something. Dismissed: deliberately cease to think about. Indispensable: absolutely necessary. Promoted: raised to a higher position or rank. Frustrated: feeling or expressing distress and annoyance resulting from an inability to change or achieve something. Now here we see that Davy was forced to appoint Faraday. Why? Because he was temporarily blind. Faraday worked very hard and he was soon promoted to be his lab assistant. One day, Davy, he tried an experiment with a fellow chemist, William Wollaston. But Davy was not successful. So he teased Faraday and he told him, "Why don't you try making this experiment work?" Faraday was successful and he went on to discover the induction motor. The induction motor spurred a revolution. Fans, air conditioning, sewing machines, photographs, power tools, cars, and even trains and aeroplane engines grew out of this simple device, which was born out of mockery directed at Faraday. Faraday became a celebrity scientist overnight. Nobody now cared about his social status or education. This young man had just created a revolution. One would think, as a teacher, Davy was happy at his pupil's achievement, but in reality he was jealous. People started telling Davy that of all his discoveries, the best was Faraday himself. This made him even more jealous, and angry Davy gave Faraday an impossible task to keep him out of his way. He handed him a piece of Bavarian glass which was used in the lenses in telescopes and microscopes, and asked him to reverse engineer it. The Bavarian glass was manufactured by a secret, complicated process, and Davy knew that with the equipment available in the lab, Faraday would never be able to accomplish the task. This piece of glass became a significant thing in his life. Faraday had a never give up attitude and he respected Davy. So he accepted the assignment despite knowing that it would be very difficult. He toiled for 4 years with no help from Davy and, as expected, failed. Faraday never learned the secret, and this remained his first failure as a scientist. To remind himself of these difficult times, he kept a single glass brick on his shelf as a souvenir. This would inspire him during difficult times. Meanings: spur, promote the development of, mockery, ridicule, overnight, for the duration of a night, achievement, a thing done successfully with effort, skill, or courage. So, here, children, we see that after the discovery of induction motor, it led to discovery of many more inventions like air conditioning, sewing machines, etc. And because of this, Faraday became very famous, and Davy was very jealous of his achievement. So he gave him a difficult task of reverse engineering Bavarian glass. Even though Faraday knew that this was a very difficult experiment or assignment, he still took it up, and as expected, he failed in this. However, he did not lose hope, and he kept a piece of this glass as a souvenir. In 1829, Davy died and Faraday succeeded him as head of the laboratory. He was free to pursue whatever he liked and he made another revolutionary discovery. He noticed that if he moved a magnet, it could produce electrical current. Thus, he could now convert motion into electricity. This is how the electrical generator was born, something still used today to generate all kinds of power like dynamos and other devices. Faraday was now a legend. In 1840, he developed memory loss, which continued for the rest of his life. But the disease did not stop him. He persevered, starting a complicated experiment to prove that light was closely related to electricity and magnetism, a novel thought in those times. Remember that piece of Bavarian glass Faraday had kept on his shelf? He was determined to convert the reminder of his first major failure to an instrument of great success. He used the same glass now to show that in the presence of a magnet, light could be isolated into a single wave rather than spreading out randomly in all directions, a concept called polarization. Meanings: succeeded, achieve the desired aim or result. Revolutionary, involving or causing a complete or dramatic change. Generate, produce or create. Legend, an extremely famous person. Persevered, continue on a course of action even in the face of difficulty or with little or no indication of success. Determined, having made a firm decision and being resolved not to change it. Convert, change the form, character, or function of something. Isolated, far away from other places, buildings, or people, randomly, without method or conscious decision. Polarization, division into two sharply contrasting groups. So, children, we see that Davy dies and Faraday becomes the head of the laboratory. And he continues different experiments. And because of his experiments, electrical generator was born. By 1840, Faraday developed memory loss. But he did not give up, and he started a complicated and difficult experiment. And what was this experiment? He used Bavarian glass to show that in the presence of a magnet, light could be isolated into a single wave. He then took the age-old experiment of sprinkling iron filings on a sheet of paper near a magnet, making circular patterns. He went on to prove that these patterns were not a property of the iron filings. In fact, they were due to the invisible magnetic fields that filled the empty space around the magnet and hence disturbed the filings. This is where his lack of formal education went against him. Faraday did not know much about advanced mathematics, so he just copied the iron filings patterns with his hands. He was unable to explain them in the form of mathematical equations. He made hundreds of such drawings, but without equations they were not accepted. Property, an attribute, quality, or characteristic of something. Invisible, unable to be seen. Here in this passage, he took up an experiment. However, he understood what was happening in these experiments, but he was not able to make mathematical equations. Why he was not able to do so? Because he did not have a formal education. Remember, at the age of 12, he had to leave school because of his speech defect. And because he was not able to present or explain in the form of mathematical equations, his drawings were not accepted. Fortune favored the brave Faraday. Once again, when he met James Maxwell, a wealthy, educated physicist well versed in mathematics, he was willing to work with Faraday. It was Maxwell who translated Faraday's idea into a set of equations that are now called Maxwell's equations. Their combined work has helped us in many ways. Electronics and communication systems today are designed around their discoveries. Someday we might even be able to communicate with aliens across different galaxies using the products of these discoveries. Faraday's life started with difficulties, but as a great scientist, he met each difficulty with perseverance and conviction. He was given impossible tasks, which he undertook as challenges and opportunities. He epitomizes what the Walt Disney character Pinocchio said: "When you wish upon a star, it does not matter who you are." Now, this passage is from the Introduction to Reignited by APJ Abdul Kalam and Srichand Pal Singh. Meanings: combined, unite for a common purpose. Epitomizes, be a perfect example of. Faraday, once again we say, did not give up. He took the help of James Maxwell, and they managed to create a set of equations. This scientist, Faraday, suffered a lot of difficulties, problems in his life. But he never gave up, whether in his life or when he was faced with difficulties in his experiments. And only it is because he was so determined that he was able to discover so many things. And that is why his life is an example or an inspiration to us. So children, with this we complete explanation for this lesson. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and take care.